Sorry if this audio is really bad. I had to use a different microphone for this video. So let's just get on to the what if. And don't forget to subscribe and like this video. You don't have to do those things, but I'm just saying. It would really help the channel, and I'd try to upload faster. Okay, let's get on to this what if. This is, what if Deku was a galaxy wolf? Now, if you do not like this kind of content, that's okay. You don't have to watch this video. But I'm just going to say this right now. I think this is going to be a really good series, so let's get into it. Deku was born with wolf paws on his hands, but they were like human-like. It was human hands, but furry, if that makes sense. And he had wolf ears, and so basically, Deku has the powers of the Galaxy Spirit. Now, that will be his quirk, Galaxy Spirit. Now, Galaxy Spirit allows him to summon a wolf-like spirit that can help him in battle. Now, him and this spirit can psychologically connect with each other. They can fuse, and Deku can become the Galaxy Spirit, or Deku can interact with this spirit, but since it is a spirit, no one else can. Now that I've covered his quirk, let's get on. Now that I've covered his mutant side of the quirk, let's get on to his transformation side of the quirk. Like I said, he can fuse with the spirit, and he can take his spirit out of his body and fly around as a spirit or a ghost. He cannot interact with physical objects, but if he wants to move around, then he can physically take his body away from his soul and take his soul out of his body. Now, when his soul is out of his body is dead. His heart doesn't beat, his blood doesn't flow. He's just dead because his spirit is gone. Now that I've covered that, let's get on to the part of his quirk that he can use to attack. Now, as you can see on the picture on the right side, that is a wolf. That is the Galaxy Spirit. Now, it has these light projectiles around it and this portal thing on its forehead. Now, let me start talking about the light projectiles. So the light projectiles are little tiny projectiles that he can shoot at anything and either illuminate or destroy things. Now, these light things, you have to be very concentrated to use them. If you lose your concentrate while you're using this ability, then they will either vaporize or they will shoot off in a random direction and not do that much damage. Now, let's get on to the portal. If you see the portal on the wolf's head, Deku has this, but it's on his hand. Now, basically, this allows him to pull people's soul out of their body or control people's souls. So, he can pull the soul out of the body and, make it so they can't go back in it. And, while their soul just stand there, like they're trapped in a box, and watch him beat up their real body. Now, once they go back in their real body, they will have all of the pain that they would feel if they were alive. Same for Deku. If he's in his spirit form and left his body, if people started stabbing and kicking him, when he woke up, he would feel excruciating pain. Yes, excruciating pain, because that's what he would feel. I don't know if you've ever been stabbed before, but I'm pretty sure it does not feel that good. Now, just like his portal, it allows him to pull souls out, and I said control souls. That means if he pulls the soul out of the body, he can use the husk of the body to basically like do whatever he wants it to do, like a zombie, kind of. Like a zombie, yeah, like a zombie. Except it follows his command. And they still have their quirk. So yeah. Okay. So let's get on to his human part of the quirk. While he's a human, he can summon these small black portals. Now these portals can either teleport things into a void dimension, including himself. And if he makes a big portal, jumps in it, makes a small portal, and comes out, he will be small also, because in the void dimension, size is irrelevant. Size does not exist. You can be tall or you can be small. You can be 15 feet tall or you can be an inch big. Now, in this void dimension, Deku controls everything that happens. Say he wants to, play a computer. He just has to imagine that a computer appears, and then a computer will appear. Now, if he tries to create things and then bring it into the real world, they will evaporate as soon as they touch the air. Now, why does this happen? This happens because the void is just a false representation of life. So, if he put someone in and then made them a baby, when they come out, they would still be a baby. It only works on non-living things. He can't, make something that doesn't exist. He can't make a dinosaur. He can make a dinosaur, but it only lasts for a few seconds. Like, he can't do anything with it. Or about it. Like even in the void, it only lasts for a few seconds. Now, I don't know about this, but he can create it if it's in the void. Like, if it's in the void dimension, and he brings, said Bakugo into the void dimension, and then imagine Bakugo turning into a little kid, then when Bakugo came out of the void dimension, he would be a little kid. Same for gender bending. If someone walked in and Deku imagined they were a different gender, when they walked out, they would be a different gender. Now, this calls for some very interesting story. So let's just get into it. Okay. So Deku was born. I'm just gonna call him Deku, but his real name is Izuku Midoriya. Deku was born as a baby that they thought had a mutant quirk. Now, even though they thought he had a mutant quirk, they were not sure. So when he was 4 years old, they brought him to the quirk doctor and diagnosed his quirk as Galaxy Spirit. Now, I know it says, what if Deku was a Galaxy Wolf? But, like I said, he confused with the Galaxy Spirit and become the Galaxy Spirit. So, he's still a Galaxy Wolf. But... Okay, so, let's go. And basically the doctor explained that Deku had these abilities that could be either strong or weak depending on how he uses them. And he explained how he could make these light projectiles and he could shoot them at will, but if he stops being concentrated while using them, then they will either evaporate or explode off in a different direction. Now, since Deku has wolf parts, that means he has really good senses. He has this one ability that I forgot to mention called Wolf Sense. Now, Wolf Sense allows him to see through walls like an X-ray and scan for things, only if he has the scent though. Since he's a wolf, he has the ability to smell things from far away. And since he is a wolf, if he gets on all fours, then he can run really fast. Like, really fast. Now, apart from that, he went to school and didn't tell anyone because he thought people would laugh at him for having a quirk that he didn't even know how to use. But when he awakened, his quirk was when Bakugo was bullying him and saying that he only had a mutant quirk that didn't even work. Now, Deku was just sitting there, taking the hits, not saying anything, looking down at his hands in despair. And then this light ball appeared, and he was shocked by this. He looked at Bakugo, concentrated, and the ball suddenly shot out and hit Bakugo in the chest. Bakugo flew back and hit a tree. Now, this didn't hurt Bakugo as much as Deku is still just a little kid. If Deku was older, that would have completely killed Bakugo. But it only gave Bakugo a slight bruise. Now that Bakugo knew that Deku was no force to be reckoned with, he walked away and said, "From this point on, we are rivals." And he said nothing else. Deku looked at his hand in shock. He was no longer in despair. He had just awoken his quirk. Now he was trying to hide that he was really happy. He was really excited that he had finally awoken his quirk. But alas, he still didn't know how he had done that, so he would spend the next hour staring at his hand until the teacher called and said, "Playtime is over, come inside." So everyone came inside. Deku was still looking at his paw. I'm just going to call it a paw. So Deku was still looking at his paw. And as he was looking at his paw, he realized that there was a sun on his thumb. Now he didn't know what this meant, but then he flicked his thumb down, and suddenly when he lifted it back up again, there was a ball of light in his hand. Deku had just realized how he had done that. So he looked on his left hand, and sure enough, there was a moon on his thumb. He tapped that on his hand, and a small black portal came and suddenly glitched out and disappeared. Now he had realized that he had just used most of his energy as he was very tired. Now the teacher had looked at him and said, "Hello, are you still there?" Deku was still in this trance-like state, looking at his paws. And then he suddenly woke up from it. And the teacher said, "I'm very disappointed in you. When your mom gets here, I'm going to tell her all about what happened today." Deku looked down at his paw in despair again. Then he created a ball of light and flicked it at the teacher. The teacher didn't know that he had done this, so the teacher said, "Who did that? Who did that? I'm about to send you to the principal, whoever did that." Bakugo just looked at Deku and just glared at Deku. Deku didn't know what to do. It's like his fingers had just moved. He didn't want to hit the teacher. But then suddenly, he felt as if people were staring at him. And then when he looked around, he looked down, and then he saw his body flopped over on his desk. Was he dead? Was he a ghost? And the teacher looked at Deku and said, "He must have passed out. Bring him to the nurse." Bakugo stood up and said, "I'm not bringing him to the nurse. Get someone else to do it." So someone stood up, and then another person stood up, and they picked him up and bring him to the nurse. When the nurse checked his heartbeat, she said, "Negative. There's no heartbeat." And then she said, "Wait, there's no heartbeat? Wait. So you're telling me he just flopped over on his desk?" The two kids looked at the nurse and nodded. Deku was watching this all. Then he heard, "You're not dead." He looked around, but he didn't see anyone. He just saw this strange dog. So he continued watching the scene. Then he heard again, "You're not dead." He thought it was just his imagination. And then again he heard the same voice he had been hearing. "Look, if you don't turn around right now." So he turned around and saw the strange dog again. Turned back around. "I'm the wolf, okay? I'm trying to talk to you, okay?" So Deku looked back at the strange wolf and said, "Wait, you're who's been talking to me?" And then the wolf said, Of course. Who else would it be?" And then Deku said, "Why aren't they looking at you strange? Am I the only one who can see you? Look, even though you may be in your spiritual form, I know that you are not dead. It's just a part of your quirk. Remember the quirk doctor?" Deku remembered, and he said, Oh, I remember now." So Deku went back into his body and woke up with a sudden shock of what had just happened. He had just talked to a wolf. And then the nurse said, "Wait, what? That's not possible." And then Deku said, "I wasn't dead. I wasn't dead." Okay. And then Deku fell back asleep. So when Deku woke up again, he was in his mom's car as Inko was trying to wake him up, as Inko had thought he was dead. Sure enough, he looked down at his hand and realized he was semi-transparent. He said, "How long have I been like this?" And then he looked over to the right to see the dog sitting in the chair and said, "You've been like this for about 5 minutes now." And then Deku said, "How long have you been sitting there?" The wolf said, "I always follow you. After all, I am your quirk. I never leave. I've been sitting here for as long as you've been here." Then Deku had looked back at his mother and gone back in his real body and said, Relax, I was just in my spiritual form." And then she said, "What?" And then she remembered and she said, Oh, oh. So how are we going to know when you're dead and you're alive?" Deku looked back at his mom and said, "I mean, if I'm dead, then I will be in my spiritual form, right?" Wait a minute. Does that mean I'm immortal? His mom looked at him and said, "Huh, never thought about it that way. Maybe you are immortal." Huh. Deku looked down at his hand again and said, "Why is my hand, like, static?" Inko's mom had looked down at his hand too and said, "What the? Why is it glitching?" Now, if you don't know what's happening, Deku had looked down at his hand and his hand was, like, glitching out. Like, if you know what that means, like, when you look at a TV sometimes and it goes static, that was with Deku, except it was, like, boxes. And then these black boxes, like, around his hand. And suddenly, he had felt a sharp pain in his hand, and it had spread down his arm. It was hurting. The more it spread, it hurt even more. Deku had tried to make a light bulb, but it was on his paw that had the sun on it, so he couldn't move his hand or the part of arm that was glitched. Deku didn't know what to do about this, so he said, "What do we do? It hurts, and I don't know what to do." Inka was having a panic attack, and she said, I'll bring you to the doctor. Yeah, that'll fix it." So she brought Deku to the doctor. By this time, the glitch was all the way to, it had already glitched out his entire right paw, or arm. It had already glitched out his entire right arm. The doctor looked down at Inko and said, "What is your problem, man?" "It says glitched, son. What does that mean?" And then the doctor looked down at Deku and said, "Oh, that's what it means." Inko looked back at him and said, "Look, my son is in distress. I need your help." And then the doctor looked back down at her and said, Okay, jeez. When the doctor looked back down at Deku, Deku had been passed out. Deku was like, "What?" Then he had looked down at his hand. Again, semi-transparent. Deku groaned and said, "Why does this keep happening? Why? It's 3 times. 3 times in a row today. Why can't I control it, and why does it keep happening so frequently?" And then Deku fell back down in the same shape that his body was in, and then woke back up. Well, I just went into my spiritual form, and that was weird. The doctor looked down at Deku and said, "Looks like his quirk is damaging him. I would try and get him to stop using his quirk for a few days, and after those few days are up, he should be a-okay. Now, I'm gonna have to keep him in here for those few days, and wrap his arms with this special, wrap the infected, glitched arms with this special quirk canceling tape, so he won't be able to use his quirk. Now, even if he keeps using this quirk, I will just wrap his entire arm around with this tape, and then I will wrap a few rounds of tape around his chest. So hopefully it should be enough to keep him from using his quirk. Now, if that doesn't work, I have some special medicine that will keep him from using his quirk. Now, bye." Inko had looked down at Deku and said, "Be good, okay?" Deku looked back at her and said, "I will be okay. Everything's fine." Inko started crying and hugged Izuku and said, "I'm gonna miss you." Deku looked back at her, crying, and said, "I know. See you in a few days, I guess." Inko looked back at him, tears in her eyes still, and said, "Are you sure you'll be okay?" And then the doctor said, "I assure you, he'll be just fine, ma'am." Inko had said, "Okay," and walked out of the room. Now the doctor had picked up Deku and wrapped this strange tape around his arm that was glitched and his chest. Deku didn't know what this was, but then he remembered the doctor saying something about quirk canceling tape. So then he had just realized that the doctor was wrapping him in quirk canceling tape. Deku didn't mind this, as he knew using his quirk would painfully harm him. The doctor said, "This is gonna hurt for a second, okay? I'm going to inject you with something that will make you fall asleep. Hopefully you won't turn back into your spiritual form. That's what I think you called it, right?" Deku looked back at him and said, "Yeah, my arm still hurts though." The doctor looked at Deku and said, "Yeah, it's gonna hurt for a second. But about this needle." Deku looked at the needle and tried to contain his screams, but alas, he opened his mouth and all that came out was a slight hiss. Now, even though he's a dog, I meant hiss as in like his soul leaving his body. Like, you know that in animes? When they get really sad or embarrassed, and then they open their mouth and their soul comes out. That's kind of what happened at Deku right now. Okay, back to the what if. The doctor had, while Deku was in trance, the doctor had injected Deku with this formula that would make him fall asleep fast. Now, this was tranquilizer. Deku had looked up and everything started to go darker and darker and darker. And then suddenly, everything went black. When he awoke, he was in this black room, all black. And then he looked around, started running, but couldn't find any wall. No walls at all. There was no walls to be seen. None at all. Deku had looked around and around, but then he heard, "So you got trapped here too, huh?" And then he looked around, ecstatic. And then he glanced around his shoulder and saw the wolf creature on his shoulder. And the wolf creature said, "Look, I didn't want to be in here either, but it looks like we're in your mindscape." Deku said, "Mindscape?" The wolf said, "Yeah, your mindscape. Your mindscape your mindscape is kind of like inside of your brain, I guess. I don't know." Anyways, guys, that will be the last part of, well, not the last part, the end of this what if. If you want to see more what ifs like this, then go check out my other video. What if Deku had a copy quirk? Anyway, that's the end of this video. Bye!